Good afternoon, everyone. I do have a couple things at the top before I turn it over to all of you. Just first of all, as you know, we had a very sad weekend here in the Department of State. We're grieving the loss of one of our own. As you heard the Secretary talk about in his statement and his press availability in Istanbul, we mourn the loss of Anne Smedinghoff, a very bright and young diplomat who was tragically killed in a horrific attack in Afghanistan over the weekend. In addition, as you know, we had 4 additional Department of State employees who are injured. In addition to Anne's death, there was a DoD civilian death, as well as Afghan colleagues and 3 members of the U.S. Armed Forces. So just to reiterate that our employees in Afghanistan are working hard to help strengthen the country and support the Afghan people's aspirations for a more stable and secure future. Anne and her colleagues' work delivering books to a school is just one example of how our people in the field are committed to this mission. Obviously, we're investigating the incident and continue to work to support our injured colleagues at this difficult time. Moving on to Ukraine. The United States welcomes Ukrainian President Yanukovych's decision to pardon former Interior Minister Lutsenko and former Environment Minister Filipchuk. This is an important first step toward addressing the international community's concern about the government of Ukraine's commitment to democracy and the rule of law. We join the European Union in calling on the Ukrainian government to end the politically motivated prosecution of former Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko and to release her from prison. Having said that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to all of you. Matt?
I'm going to defer to Elise.
I have a couple. First of all, on the death of Margaret Thatcher, we saw the Secretary's statement, but WikiLeaks is putting forward a cable, a 1975 cable that is describing her as decisive, confident, disciplined, and intelligent. It's a glowing cable. I was wondering if you have seen this on WikiLeaks or if you can authenticate that this cable is...
Well, first of all, just to say, as you mentioned, the United States, we did put out messages from President Obama, released a message, and Secretary Kerry has released a message on the death of Margaret Thatcher. And we reiterate our condolences to the people of the United Kingdom. In terms of classified cables, the United States, the Department of State, does not comment on materials, including classified documents, which may have been leaked. Our understanding is, hold on, let me finish. Our understanding is that there are some very old documents here. We're still looking to see what all of this may be, but there is a process through which, and in fact it's in our Bureau of Public Affairs, the historian's office, through which material is properly declassified and released to the public. I'm not sure if this particular document you're referring to may be one of those documents, but in general we have a process to do this, and it's done very carefully and appropriately. And so I really can't comment on documents that may have been leaked that are not declassified, but obviously we work here in the Department of State through our Office of the Historian to properly declassify historical documents.
Well, my understanding is the documents that are being talked about today were already declassified through they're not new leaked. They weren't leaked at all. They've just been put together in a searchable database for the first time.
Again, I don't have more details on it. The bottom line is we do in the Department of State work through a process to declassify material, to publish material of historical documents and make those available to the public. So. But again, I don't have any more information if there were indeed documents that had not been declassified. So, if
so
there
you
were,
don't know whether these cables about Margaret Thatcher were actually declassified?
I can't comment on neither their authenticity nor their status of classification.
Okay. Well, I have another one
Yep.
about this trip by Beyonce and Jay-Z to Cuba.
Yep.
Did this come through the State Department? Did they have some kind of program or any kind of cultural exchange that they were working for? Do you know anything about the trip?
Well, just to say, Elise, that under the Obama administration, there had been regulatory changes made to travel regulations, both in April 2009 and January 2011, that were designed to increase people-to-people contact. The bottom line, though, and the goal and intent of those is to promote people-to-people travel for greater engagement between Cubans and Americans. But the bottom line is it's Treasury that implements some of those specific travel regulations, and so I really refer to them on this travel of private U.S. citizens.
But you don't know specifically whether there was some kind of Treasury would give the license, but about the people-to-people contacts, that would fall under the domain of the State Department. So,
I mean, we certainly consult in the interagency to make sure.
Did you consult in this case?
I'm not aware that we did. Saeed.
Change topics.
First, I regret missing Ms. Newland's last briefing.
You missed
On
some delicious cupcakes.
Yeah, exactly. On the Secretary's trip, today, Tzipi Livni, the Minister of Justice in Israel, told Ma'arif that the Israelis are dropping the demand that the Palestinians recognize Israel as a Jewish state. And in exchange, they will demand that 2 states for 2 people. Is that something that the Secretary of State sort of negotiated with the Israelis?
Well, Saeed, I'm going to disappoint you here a little bit because obviously, as you know, the Secretary continues his travel and continues his consultations with both Israelis and Palestinians, ongoing, including today and tomorrow. So a lot of issues are being discussed on both sides. I'm simply not going to get into any of the specifics as this diplomacy is playing out.
Yeah, but this was deemed as something that Mr. Netanyahu came up with actually to sort of put obstacles in the way of the negotiation. So a hurdle would have been moved, so that would be a feather in the Secretary's cap if he did that.
Again, I'm just not going to comment on the ongoing diplomacy. He's in the region. His meetings continue.
Okay, so my last question on this trip, what is expected? I mean, some people are talking about 2 months, 3 months, or a few weeks before some sort of a proposal coming out of this building. Could you comment on that?
Again, sorry to disappoint, Saeed. You know the Secretary's travel is ongoing, and Tori did lay out some of the broad framework of the Secretary's travel last week, but I just don't have any updates for you.
On Egypt,
Michelle.
clashes in Egypt between Christians and Muslims. Any State Department officials talk to the Egyptian government about its responsibility to protect Copts?
Thanks for the question, Michelle. Let me just say that we condemn all the recent violence we've seen in Egypt, including the sectarian violence that has taken the lives of 7 Egyptians and injured many more over the past few days. We call for restraint on all sides. We extend our deepest condolences to the friends and family of those Egyptians, both Christian and Muslim, who were killed or injured in the recent violence in and around Cairo. And we do welcome President Morsi's promise over the weekend to conduct a full and transparent investigation. As you heard Tori say last week, we think it's very important for them to expeditiously investigate all acts of violence, regardless of the situation in which it came about.
But has anybody talked to the government about protecting the minorities in Egypt?
It's something that we consistently raise with our Egyptian counterparts, certainly at the level of the embassy, but additionally from Washington as appropriate. And so, we're very clearly here condemning any sectarian violence, and we want the rights of Egyptians, all Egyptians, to be respected. Clearly, that's was one of the primary goals of the revolution. Indeed, was to ensure that a new Egypt would respect the rights of all Egyptians.
Can we move on to North Korea?
Sure.
Egypt?
One last one on Egypt. Go ahead.
One
Sir.
very quickly.
Yep.
There are accusations that are people closely tied to the government or to the Muslim Brotherhood that are actually fanning the flames of anti-Coptic, anti-Christian elements in Syria. Do you have any information on that?
Just to say that we have seen some of these claims. We're looking into them, but we've seen some of the rumors, for instance, that some of the security forces were aiding or at least standing aside while these attacks occurred. We're looking into it. We don't have further information, but we're certainly looking into it.
On North Korea, the South Koreans are making some noise that they think the North Koreans might be preparing another nuclear test. Do you have any information that would indicate that they are? Also, they told all foreign embassies to that their employees or their diplomats should leave by April 10th, which kind of would indicate that they feel that there would be some violence on that day. Do you have anything on that?
At least just to say, of course, we can't comment on matters of intelligence and what we may or may not be seeing, but any future nuclear test or missile launch would be in direct violation of UN Security Council resolutions and would lead to further pressure and isolation. So we would strongly discourage against that course of action, of course. In terms of, Tori talked a little bit about on Friday about some of these actions that the DPRK took with respect to their foreign embassies in their capital. I don't have anything to add, but I would say one thing about this industrial complex, the joint industrial complex, Kaesong, that we do remain in close consultation with our Republic of Korea counterparts on this. Closing it would be regrettable, given that more than 50,000 North Korean people are employed there, and it would not help them achieve their stated desire to improve their economy and better the lives of their people. So that would be a regrettable action if they continue in that direction. We have a couple more. Go ahead.
Do you have any information on how many Americans are in North Korea right now?
This question came up I believe it was on either Thursday or Friday. The bottom line is that, as you know, we don't require U.S. citizens to register or come to us when they travel abroad, so it's not possible for us to have exact numbers. We encourage all American citizens when they're traveling overseas to register with us so we can keep them with the most updated information. In the case of going to the DPRK, we do not have an embassy in Pyongyang. All of our affairs, especially concerning citizens, are handled by the Swedish protecting power. So we don't have sort of a reliable statistic, but we do indeed encourage all people to register.
Right, so are you saying that you are only aware of one American in North Korea right now, and that's the detainee?
I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying it would be disingenuous to say that we have an exact count on how many
No one's
American
asking
citizens.
for an exact count. We were just trying to get an idea. However inexact, that was the whole point of the question on Friday.
Right.
Has anybody registered with the Swedes?
Yes, we do have citizens who register. They're humanitarian workers that
Okay,
come in
so,
and out.
Roughly how many?
We are taking a look at seeing how much of that we can capture for you. But the bottom line is it's a little bit hard to give you a reliable estimate of there are 100 or 200
Not
or
asking
300.
for an estimate of the total number of people there. I am just asking at least for the number who have registered with the Swedes. I don't see how giving that information out would be a problem.
All right.
We're not asking for their names and their addresses.
I'd be happy to further look into the specific instance of those who've registered with our
But you do
Swedish
know that
protecting
there
power.
are some who have.
There are American citizens who specifically
registered.
humanitarian. My understanding is yes.
Yes, okay. And so since Friday, 72 hours later, no one has that number?
Matt, we did look into the broader picture of registering and capturing the number of citizens.
Right.
This is a bit more complicated than.
Okay, hold on. And when you were looking into the broader picture, no one thought, it might be nice to know how many? Or they
part
just
of it
left
is-
it as, okay, there's some, so you don't,
Yeah.
no one bothered to ask the question of how many? You're not interested in knowing how many?
Part of the challenge here, Matt, is that a lot of these folks come in and out frequently.
I totally understand
So
that. I'm just
if-
asking for the number of
Let me
people,
go back to our
number
experts.
of Americans who have registered with the Swedish embassy
Right.
in Pyongyang.
Let me
as
go back to our
being
experts
in North Korea.
and see. The issue is that many of these folks come in and out of the country, and it's a little bit unreliable to say this captures how many Americans are in the country.
You don't.
Let me finish, Matt. The matter of registering
Yes.
people who are frequent travelers or folks who have frequent humanitarian business in DPRK or other reasons to travel there is a different matter. I'm happy to look
That's
into
the
it.
question.
I'm happy to look into it.
Thank you.
I think we have some follow-ups on DPRK. Go ahead.
I want to ask about your view on China's stance on North Korea. Yesterday, Chinese President Xi Jinping said no one should be allowed to throw a region or even the whole world into chaos for selfish gain. What's your reading to this?
Well, the bottom line is, and this is true for both Beijing as well as our counterparts in Moscow, the Russians, we encourage the Chinese to make their case to Pyongyang that they have to refrain from provocative rhetoric and threats. So we'll continue to work with the Chinese, we'll continue to work with the Russians and other partners to get North Korea to abide by its obligations.
Pleased to see China now is taking a harder stance on this issue.
You know, we've talked about this last week at some length, and you know that they're a vital six-party talk partner. They have a unique role to play given their economic, diplomatic, and historical ties with the DPRK. So, as you know, the Secretary will be raising this when he meets with his Chinese counterparts here in just a few days, and it's something we certainly raise with them. So anything they can do to continue to put pressure on the DPRK to change course is welcome.
So do you think that the speech was, in fact, putting pressure on? I mean, you said that you're encouraging the Chinese to use whatever influence they have to get the North. So do you see the speech, the president's speech, as something that was, I mean, he didn't mention North Korea by name, but it was pretty clear who he was talking about. So is that a positive thing that you, from your point of
I
view?
think we'll let the Chinese clarify their remarks and further parse them.
But, yes, but are you encouraged, are you pleased with the fact that the speech was given, that he said what he said in the speech?
I mean, any signals that the Chinese are
And you
going to...
regard this as a signal to the North Koreans?
Again, I hesitate to speak for the Chinese. That's for the
I'm
Chinese
not asking
to
you
do.
to speak for the Chinese. I'm asking you to speak for your boss. Your boss is the U.S. government,
We
the State
certainly-
Department.
we
So
cer-
do you think that, do you view what the Chinese president said as being encouragement or warning to the North Koreans to stop going down the path that they're going down?
Yeah, we certainly took note, Matt, and clearly are paying attention to the Chinese public statements as well as what they tell us in
So
private.
you
Well,
took
if you
note,
took note of it,
but
then what does that mean? What did you note?
we took note that they made this declaration, and again, you all
you
as
regard that
analysts will
And how
interpret
do you
it.
interpret it?
Look, I think I've done what I can on this.
Why? I mean, you obviously have an opinion of it, so why, if you, to say that you find it notable, that you took note of it, would indicate that you find it significant.
Look, you guys know that it wouldn't be appropriate for me as a spokesperson of the U.S. government to try to put words in the mouth of the Chinese. They made their statement. I'll let them clarify their president's remark. But suffice it to say, we're encouraged by anything that signals that Beijing will continue to get tough with the DPRK.
And this is something that you're encouraged by, Patrick? This is something.
Can we let another
No,
colleague get in?
because you need to answer this question. Is this something that you're encouraged by? The speech?
All aspects of the speech. Look, Matt, I haven't seen the whole speech.
No,
I've seen the
the
reporting on the
stuff
specific
about-
line.
Yes. Is this something that you're pleased with? Do you think this is a good thing? Do you think that the Chinese did the right thing, the Chinese president did the right thing in saying this? Or is it just something that you think is going to go, that you don't care about and go?
Matt, I think the thrust of the comment was about security and stability in
Yes.
Asia. That's something we certainly agree with
Well, you just
on
said
China,
that-
and so of
So
course
the
we
answer
welcome
is
something in that
yes. It
direction.
was very easy to get to that one
Well,
word answer.
look, the bottom line is yes, we share with the Chinese the same goals of peace and security and stability
But
in
you
Northeast
said
Asia.
that you were encouraged by anything that suggests that the Chinese are getting tougher on North Korea. Do you see this statement as the Chinese getting tough on North Korea?
I mean, I think it wouldn't be appropriate for us here from the podium to sort of take the Chinese viewpoint and try to parse it. In the back.
Actually, it's kind of the same because the Chinese foreign minister had said the same thing. And actually, he was more clear about the China stance on North Korea. He said China won't allow any chaos happen next to China's
Right.
border. So
Well, let's take a step back. The Chinese have been very helpful and cooperative with us in the Security Council in terms of the resolution, in terms of the follow-on sanctions. So we're working constructively and collaboratively with the Chinese, encouraged by it, and the Secretary will continue his discussion directly with them. And so rather than me sort of interpreting it one way or another here, he'll have a chance to directly address this issue with the Chinese when he's in Beijing in just a few days.
What Chinese action would be deemed tough in this case? What do they need to do?
Saeed, the bottom line is we need the DPRK to come in line with its international obligations and take a different course. And so persuading them to take a different course is the right action. In the back?
The Swiss have offered to mediate discussions between North Korea and other parties. What are your thoughts on this proposal? And have the Swiss contacted you directly to propose meetings between the U.S. and North Korea?
I'll have to check on that. I'm not aware of a potential Swiss role. I'll check on that. Go ahead.
On North Korea,
Yeah.
if they are going to launch the missile again, so what is your next step? Are you going to UN again? And are you going to pressure?
Look, I wouldn't speculate on further action other than to say that, this would be not only provocative but a clear violation of their UN Security Council obligations. Saeed, go ahead, sir.
Yes, there was an explosion today in one of the major squares of Damascus. It's like, DuPont Circle in Sabah Bahar. And like 20 people were killed, dozens others were wounded. This action would be characterized as terrorist anywhere else in the world. How do you characterize it?
So let me see if I have a ground update for you in Syria. Just to say, now this is an attack this morning that you're referring to. We have seen the news reports of that attack and are seeking more information. In terms of some of the violence we saw over the weekend, we do have information that the Assad regime turned its weapons against its own citizens by launching a barrage of rockets into the Barzeh district of Damascus. And so according to our contacts, several rockets hit residential areas of Basra Thursday night and Friday morning, killing a number of people. We strongly condemn these attacks. Certainly any other attacks that kill civilians in Damascus, we strongly condemn as well. And we've been clear about condemning that kind of violence on both sides throughout the conflict, Saeed.
But this was apparently a suicide bombing, similar to what happens in Iraq and elsewhere. It has the trademark of Al-Qaeda affiliates and so on. Don't you condemn don't you term it as a terrorist action?
Again, Saeed, we've seen the news reports. We're looking into this for more information. We have consistently in the past condemned events that target civilians and perpetrate this kind of violence. And let me add to that and just say there clearly are some elements, like we've been very clear about al-Nusra and some extremist elements who perpetrate a vision and perpetrate violence that is directly at odds with the well-being of the Syrian people. And so we roundly condemn that. But again, on the specific event. Other than the media reports, I don't have additional information.
Lastly, Mr. Ghassan Hutto, the Prime Minister of the transitional government, toured certain areas in Syria, and it was alleged that he met with American officials representing different agencies and so on, talk about aid and help and logistics. Could you comment on that?
We don't have any American personnel inside of Syria. It's possible that we had a meeting in Turkey about aid. Certainly, going back, Mr. Hito's been somebody we've worked with consistently over time on aid delivery. So I'd have to look into the specifics, but he's somebody who's been a primary interlocutor on those issues. Michelle, you've been patient.
We
Yep.
don't have any American personnel inside Syria. Are you speaking on behalf of the entire government, all agencies?
Well, you know,
Or are you speaking on behalf of the State
Matt,
Department?
you know, we closed our embassy and withdrew our personnel,
You're talking about the State Department.
and so we do not
I'm
have
just
State
one-
Department personnel.
Well, exactly. But so when you say we don't have any American personnel, you're talking about your agency, your branch of government. You're not speaking categorically for the entire.
You know, Matt, that I speak for the Department of State, so I'm very clearly saying that we don't have State Department personnel inside of Syria. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Michelle.
Iraqi authorities forced an Iranian airplane today to land for searching for weapons bound for Syrian regime fighters, but they found only humanitarian aid and medical supplies. Was there any coordination between the U.S. and Iraq about this action, and how do you view it?
Well, Michelle, we're encouraged by reports that the government of Iraq may have conducted an inspection of an Iranian aircraft. So if it's true, that's a very positive step that needs to be followed up consistently with unannounced, credible inspections to ensure that Iraqi airspace is not used to rearm Assad and facilitate his assault upon the Syrian people. So we urge Iraq to be diligent in fulfilling its obligations and commitments and requiring that all flights, either all flights to Syria land in Iraqi territory for credible inspection, or by denying entirely overflight requests for aircraft going to Syria.
Was there any coordination between the U.S. and Iraq? Have you provided any information to the Iraqi government?
I'm not aware on the specific case, but suffice it to say, the Secretary was clear that we're looking what more we can do to make sure that we're in contact and collaboration with our Iraqi counterparts so that they can stop this activity.
So are you aware, is this the third flight that's been inspected since last September?
I don't think I can speak to the whole historical breadth
This is
of
the
this.
first since the Secretary's visit to Iraq where he secured or allegedly, or spoke to.
As far as I know, this is the first, Matt.
So this would be number 3.
I believe that's correct.
And you believe that there's still, what, a significant amount of flights per week that are going?
I mean, again, without providing specifics, I can say that we've been very concerned about the steady flow of this route between
All right, so
Iran and
but
Syria.
is this is the first one since the Secretary was there about 10 days ago or so, you would think that more than just this one flight have gone, judging by what you've said in the past, you think that more than just this one, there were at least several flights that did not get.
So what I, and you heard me say this in the second part of what I said here a couple minutes ago, is that it needs to be followed up consistently with unannounced, credible inspections to ensure Iraqi airspace is not
I
abused.
understand that totally, but what I'm getting at is, do you believe that there were a number of flights that, since the Secretary's visit, have gone uninspected?
I mean, again, I can't, I don't have any intelligence to provide in that regard other than to say this is something that had been consistent and persistent and at an unacceptable volume. And so, again, I can't sort of provide a number one way or another, but we're very clear about what we want the Iraqis to do going forward. You've been patient. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Tell me your name and who you're
I'm
with.
Celine Jaswang, Azerbaijan NS Television.
Okay.
On trip to Turkey, Secretary also discussed Nagorno-Karabakh conflict with Mr. Davutoglu. Do you have anything on that? And are there any plans to somehow give impetus to the peace talks and as to what to do with the occupation of Azerbaijan's territories?
Just to say that, again, I'm not aware exactly in what context it might have come up in the Secretary's visit to Turkey, but to reiterate, the U.S., and you know that we're a co-chair of the Minsk group, we remain deeply committed to working with the sides to achieve a peaceful settlement of the conflict. So we believe that the use of force will not resolve the conflict, and we call upon all parties to refrain from the use or threat of use of force. But I don't have any more information about in what context it may have come up in the Secretary's diplomacy in Turkey.
How about the Turkey-Armenia relations? Any developments in that regard?
That's something that we consistently raise with our Turkish counterparts, but I don't have any information one way or another for you. Tolga?
One more on Turkey.
Sure.
the terminology that you are using to characterize the Turkish people living in Turkey, the people living in Turkey. The first Victoria Nuland used this term, the Turkish citizens, instead of Turkish nation. And yesterday, Secretary Kerry also used the term of Turkey's nations. I mean, this is a very controversial issue in Turkey, actually. While the political parties are working on a draft of a new constitution, this question is the word of Turkish will stay on the constitution or not. So if I could get a comment on your preference to use this term when you're mentioning about the Kurdish opening.
Tolga, you're addressing this constitutional issue, which indeed the Secretary did raise, and I'll refer you to the exact line that he said in his press availability, which is that our hope is that the Constitution will respect and reflect the country's remarkable diversity, which is a part of its great strength. So that's our position. The Secretary was clear about it.
So it's a deliberate choice to use the Turkish citizens since last month?
Again, I think the Secretary spoke clearly that we want any of these constitutional changes to ensure that the country's diversity is respected. I'm not going to sort of parse the Secretary's words beyond that.
But just to clarify, sometimes when you mention about, for example, humanitarian aid to Syria, you are using the term of Turkish nation, but in the Kurdish opening issues, you are preferring this Turkish citizen term. That's why I'm trying to understand, is it deliberate choice or not? I mean, you're going to keep to use this term on all the Turkish issues, all the related Turkish stories, or just for the Kurdish issues?
Look, this is something that's being worked through in the constitutional process, and I can't sort of take a position one way or another about how it's been used historically, but we've said Turkish before, but the bottom line is that this is something that's being worked through for the Constitution.
Are you aware of any change regardless of what reason, has there been some change in your terminology?
No, because this is something that's being worked through by...
No, but in the way you refer to it,
no.
I mean, there hasn't been there is no policy shift in talking. I mean, it's not like when you decided to recognize Macedonia as Macedonia.
There's no policy shift here. Thanks. Scott?
I have another question just about the Turkey stuff, and that is the Secretary also said that he felt the Turks were handling the Israel rapprochement sensitively and thoughtfully. Just wondering if, since he has left, have you seen anything that would make you either doubt or question or back up those comments? Anything between the Turks and the Israelis over the past 48 hours?
And are you referring to something in specific, something that happened in Turkey or so?
Anything involving the rapprochement. Have you seen any progress or regression since he's been there?
First of all, to say, just to reiterate for everybody that and you heard the Secretary talk about this, that we deeply value our partnership with both countries, and as the Secretary said, we want them to get their relationship back on track in full measure. And I don't think we're going to sort of step by step, day by day, take an assessment every day of how that's going, but it's something that we've worked very hard on, and I want to see them continue through until they finish. So I don't think I'm going to characterize it beyond that.
So when something happens that's good, you're not going to say that you're pleased by it? I'll remember that when they do something that you think is good and you do say it, and I'll remind you that you said that you're not going to talk about.
Well, you haven't been very specific about what exactly I was.
I'm looking for anything that would make you think that this is either going in the right direction or it's going in the wrong direction since the Secretary was there.
Well, the Secretary still is in Israel.
Since he was in Turkey.
Since he was in Turkey, again, I'm not aware. I'd be happy to look into it. But Scott, go ahead.
Balkans, please. Do you have anything about the result of the elections in Montenegro and the re-election of the incumbent president?
Yep. Thanks, Scott. We congratulate the people of Montenegro on the recent presidential elections. We look forward to seeing the official results when they are released, and we understand that there were ODIHR monitors there and they've made a report. So refer you to them for the analysis of the conduct of the elections. But we're awaiting final results still.
Serbia has said that it's certainly willing to keep talking about the northern Kosovo issue, but is rejecting the proposal that was put forth in the Lady Ashton talks last week. So do you have an idea of where the United States would like to see that process go from here?
Well, Scott, I think you've heard us say previously last week that we encourage both sides to seize this extraordinary opportunity to reach this agreement that opens their respective paths to European integration. We've seen some comments back and forth as this plays out. I know there's a deadline coming up, but the bottom line is we're going to continue to encourage both sides to seize this extraordinary opportunity. We've been very supportive of the EU High Representative, Lady Ashton's leadership and work on this. We've had folks in this building that have continued to help where we can and continue to be supportive, but I don't have an update beyond that other than we continue to encourage them to seize this opportunity. Well, let's go ahead and have somebody here. We've got another.
Hi, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell me your name.
Rosie Gray, BuzzFeed.
Hi, Rosie. How you doing?
Nice to meet you.
Okay.
Just back to WikiLeaks for 1 second. They had a press conference this morning, and Julian Assange sort of beamed in from his hideout in London, and he was saying that part of the reason that they decided to do this project, which isn't a leak, but just, mashing together all these cables into a searchable database, is because the government over here doesn't do a good enough job of making declassified documents actually, making these diplomatic cables actually usable for people. Like, they're public, you can find them, but do you have anything, does the State Department have any opinion on that sort of charge? Or?
So let me check in with our experts in the Office of the Historian about what our procedures are for declassification, how we make it available to the American public, and see if I can get you all a readout as soon as possible on some of those procedures. Sure.
Do you have any comment now that the Almaty round is over and apparently things are where they were before the talks?
Well, Saeed, you know that we had the second round of talks in Almaty over the weekend. The P5, we were very united and continued to press Iran to address their concerns. I think you heard the Secretary talk about how, while the talks were substantive, it's quite clear that a significant gulf exists between the P5+1 and Iran. So we're consulting on what the next step should be. We continue to believe it's important to work for a diplomatic solution, but we're back consulting in capitals right now is the state of play.
Do you believe that you are exactly where you were, let's say, a month or 2 months ago, or some progress have been made?
I don't think I would characterize it that way. I mean, the bottom line is that the talks were dealing with the core issues and were substantive, but it became clear that, we'd hoped that they would would come to Almaty 2 prepared to make concrete progress, and unfortunately that was not the case. Sure.
It's threatening today to withdraw from the NPT if the West intensifies sanctions or refers the nuclear case to the UN Security Council, as an Iranian official has said. Do you have any reaction to that?
I haven't seen that one way or another, Michelle, in terms of a report on that, but we've long encouraged Iran to come into compliance with its obligations as an NPT member, and in addition to that, their Security Council obligations. So that's something we've been consistent about, but I'd have to look into the specific report. One more?
Secretary's trip to Asia.
Yeah.
His idea on Asia is not very clear to me yet, so I'm just wondering if there is any possibility that he's going to make any major speech on Asia during his visit in the region.
Well, when we can get you some more information on each of the stops, we put out specific dates when he's going to be in the Republic of Korea, China, and Japan. So as we can get some more information for you on the specific stops, we will.
One more.
Go ahead, Michelle.
A member of Parliament, Tamam Salam, was named to form a new government there. Do you have any reaction to that?
Thanks, Michelle. We do welcome President Suleiman's designation of a new prime minister. Prime Minister-designate Salam's nomination is the first step in the government formation process. The bottom line is that this process is and should and must be a Lebanese process.
How do you view Mr. Salam?
Well, the bottom line is we think that the Lebanese people deserve a government that reflects their aspirations, their stability and sovereignty. And so this is the first step. I think we can comment further once it's complete, but we welcome the move and look forward to working with the new Prime Minister.
Do you have any relation with this gentleman?
I'm sure he's known to our colleagues at the embassy, but I'm not aware of what our past working relationship is with him one way or another. Okay? Thanks.